Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very special guest on in Paul Davis. Paul, you are a field chief technology officer at NetApp. I'm going to have you explain a little bit more about that. But I wanted to bring up a couple of points that I thought were just fascinating about your background. Professionally, you've been in the business a long time and done things that are just incredible. Like you were part of the rebuilding effort behind the rebuilding of the Pentagon after the 9/11 attacks. Absolutely fascinating. You've been in mission critical app development. You've overseen data centers worldwide. You also, personally, you've done a number of different triathlons. And what I found fascinating was that you actually helped restore paintings for the Smithsonian. That's a very diverse, broad background. And I know it only starts to paint the picture of Paul Davis, but if you could, before we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. And then we're going to dive into our subject today, which is redefining failure. And what we mean by that is why company success depends on chief technology officers and teams seeing what others are missing in order to create success in their business. Before we do that, I'd love to have you explain a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here today. When you look at your career, it's a continuum and everything builds to where you are today. And so when I started with the painting conservation, my first degrees are in fine art and chemistry. And then I went on to get computer science and advanced degrees. And they gave me a worldview of how to look at problems. And I think that's what CTOs do for people. They provide a language between the technical people, the business people, the product people in helping to frame solutions around customer problems and sometimes put tension against organizations to move in ways that they otherwise wouldn't want to move.
Makes perfect sense. And I think that kind of background and that philosophy is what we're going to get into here today, because there is a very unique lens and perspective that the CTO brings to the organization. So I'd love to just ask you, what makes the CTO role unique in your mind in shaping the success, the failure enterprise level, the projects, the initiatives? But when you're a chief technology officer, not only are you responsible for the functional technology role that you play, but you are also an executive. And that is responsible then for long-term sustained growth of the business. So you have very much business perspective as well as technology perspective that you're balancing. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that balancing act and how you play in that role.
So in the CTO, and then I'll talk specifically what I'm doing today, for a lot of people who are CIOs, they're caught in the tactical business of the organization. You know, how to keep the lights running, how to keep metering going, how to make sure your desktop experience is what you want it to. Where CTOs get to play is helping in defining that strategy, but also looking out beyond what's next. In other words, not staying in the sales of 30, 60, 90, but then taking a longer view to say, how is what we're doing today setting us up to be successful tomorrow? And sometimes raising those questions to both the organization and customers who may not be thinking about that. And I think at NetApp, in the field CTO, which is part of the sales organization, where I'm applying all of those capabilities, but now into the sales flow of how helping customers and the sales teams position our product in that same way for both the current needs and future needs.
So it's really interesting because every CTO should have, as part of what they do, enabling sales. If we're not enabling sales inside of an organization, what are we doing? But you've got a very specific role as a field CTO in being much more integrally intertwined with the sales department. Tell us a little bit about that relationship and how it's different than the traditional CTO, maybe that we think about today.
Sure. So when I was a CTO at another company, I had engineers reporting to me. I reported at times to the president of the company, and I was there setting the stage for how are we going to, as an organization, drive business. In a field CTO organization, I'm one of several CTOs that we tend to be divided up by geographic or domain or some capability. And now we're focusing on taking what the company has put together out of the product division and bringing capabilities to that sales play, where now the client executives, system and engineers can use us in a way that's more focused for their needs. So it's just a smaller version of what might be an overall CTO.
Makes sense. So here's what I'd love to do. The title of what we're talking about here is Redefining Failure so that we can create success. And when we talked before, you talked about the skills gap in enterprise technology today. Could you explain a little bit more about that and what you meant?
Sure. If you look at just today, what you're doing differently than you were doing last year with energetic AI and ChatGPT and all the different flavors of that, how your applications are more intelligent. If you as an individual are not keeping up, you're being one step removed from how the technology works. So now take it in a corporate setting. In a corporate setting, companies have training that they plan for. And so now all this is coming together where we're moving at paces we never moved before. Coming out of COVID, the changes of back to work, I think as an industry, not as any individual or company, we're seeing that just on a phone call earlier, where they're just not up to speed with where they want to be. We had a conversation with a group about AI just before this call, and they're still grappling with how they're going to do that. And then if we present to them, our sales player or someone else does, how are they best equipped to now interpret that and say, is that the right solution? And then 6 months from now, that's going to change as well. We're really at a fast pace.
So there's problems that are outpacing training. There are opportunities that are outpacing training. There's technology that's outpacing training. You're getting it from all different sides. So is that the CTO's role to not only bring in the right talent, be able to keep the training pace together, but also you just said you were on a call where they didn't really know what their plan with AI is. Like, I can't tell you how many organizations I talk to that know they're going to use AI, that know that AI is going to fundamentally change their business, but they don't really know how to implement, to tactically take it on. That's a big responsibility in the world of AI today that the CTO has.
So if you remember that I brought up at the beginning, it's a talking point that I believe CTOs put stressors on organizations. They're a tensor, we'll use AI term. And I think one of the things that even I did in this last call is to step back from, I don't know this, I don't understand this, but to say, this is something you need to think about. And we can help you. It's not today's call, or we need to find someone who can help you. But I think that the role of the CTO is sometimes raising the level of the conversation to say, are you aware of what you're doing? Your head's down, I'll put my head down, in the moment, but you're not thinking to solve this problem. I need more skills. I need to look at it a different way. I need to potentially train my people differently, or at least accept the risk that I don't understand what I'm doing right now, or add that to the equation of what I'm doing.
So it's interesting because when you talked about it, there is, maybe we're not going to solve this today, but let's simplify what the problems are. Let's simplify where the gap in understanding is, or the gap in execution. In most areas in business, simplifying things so that we're all moving in the same direction is a good thing. But you actually talked about why sometimes simplifying, or you said sound bites, how oversimplification in messaging can create risk in actual technical delivery, project delivery.
Correct. So let's just go back to this conversation, because part of what I've been having with this team, and they want to get to simple terms, except you can't build a simple term. When you all start building a complex architecture, it requires that people that's analysts and developers and product people understand explicitly what the test case and success looks like. And so to say, we'll go back to what we've said is, I need AI doesn't answer the question. Right. I need AI to do this. I need this quality. I need to accept, here's how I'm going to prove the AI will work. I need to understand if the data moves this much, how brittle is my model? And so we talk in almost like chat today. If it's not in 144 characters, old Twitter, X today, then you get lost in the detail, except to go build things, it does take detail. And so to get to the point is there's times where we need to talk in the sound bites because we're all distracted. But then there's a time to say, and this is where I think CTOs help, is to say, okay, let's unpack this part of what you're talking about. What do you mean by that? What does the language mean? How can someone take that and actually implement it? If you don't know how to do it, how can we help you to understand that?
And that implementation side is so important. And you talked very eloquently about really in your team, you've got like the infrastructure side, you've got the app development side, you've got different teams, different roles that have different mandates. But we're still all heading in the same project direction. The same deliverable has to be maintained there. Sometimes those two sides can be very siloed.
They are. And I'll frame it as the infrastructure side of the house, we'll call that ISP. And the application side of the house, we'll call that ASP. And when those terms were created, it was created to actually simplify the conversation because you could do things in infrastructure that really didn't impact application. I need this server ready and I'm good to go. I need this storage provisioned, and so long as it's there, I'm good to go. But now as we're talking about containerized workloads that are intelligent, knowing what to do, we're really seeing a fusion of those capabilities intertwining. And I think this is where the conversations and the way we've organized ourselves is what worked for the ISP, ASP in the past is not going to work today. I work for a storage company, the intelligent data infrastructure, and I can't tell you how many times I talked to an application team that really never thought that storage management functions could make their life easier. And so I think, again, back to where a field CTO can help is to say, is just to make people aware to say the silos of yesterday are not going to build the systems you want tomorrow and today.
Getting teams to work together, high performance teams are what create success. That's the reason why VCs and PE firms, they invest in people first and the idea second. So getting these teams to work together is so important. You talked about something that I remember from 30, 40 years ago, a quote from Bill Gates at a conference, and he said, I love to hire people that have failed because there's big learning that happens in there. And you look at failure as a strategic advantage. How do you use that as a strategic advantage in order to create success?
Let's go back to that conversation, what I was meaning by that. When you look at companies or the COOs are investing dollars, they want to see successes. The reality is, if you just look across, you go to the supermarket and you just look at the brands of cereals, not all of them are going to be successful. And they're not successful not because they don't taste good. There's lots of complex reasons. And when you're doing ideation, the idea, and failing is a term of fail fast, got buzz, but it's how quickly can you ideate to get to the solution that is technically viable and business viable, and the market likes it. Because you can get to technically viable solutions that won't make the market. An example from the past, VHS and beta, VCRs. One was considered superior to the other, but the other had a better marketing and channel. And where you are and what you're doing, if the idea is I'm going to build something once, I've got to get it right the first time. Show me examples in any industry where that likely happens. People need to iterate. And so what I want is people who, to get to the point is, you build resiliency by having gone through this several times. You're not defeated. It's sort of like when I used to race. If I didn't win a race, I learned from it. And so you want people who are resilient, learn fast, and move on, and don't bring that baggage with them. And that's what I meant by it.
There's a lot of studies and facts and figures behind the fact that a culture that supports emotional safety and security of people on the team, that they know they can fail and that's okay, because that's a sign that they're trying and they're innovating and they're doing new things. And also use the term failing forward.
Yes.
And is that different than failing fast, or is that?
I think it's just my sort of take on it, which is I want to move the ball forward. Like I've been involved in sort of real mission applications that had to be completed in a certain time frame. And so when we failed, and we did fail, there's things that worked, there were things that didn't work. That didn't create an opportunity for us to make it. We couldn't change the deadline. We had to be present, we had to be engaged, and we had to make bets, I'll use the term bets here, on what risk we were willing to take and how quickly could we move forward from those learning experiences. And a failure is a learning capability, opportunity.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of failing forward, because it actually implies that it's okay, because that's part of our forward motion, and moving forward in our projects is learning from those failures. It's the first time I had actually heard that, and I thought that was a great way to frame that. We talked about AI. We talked about how we all know in business overall, it's going to disrupt, it's going to change the way that we do things. What is your point of view as a chief technology officer, and how AI is going to impact our workforce planning, our long-term talent development, our overall success?
I think this is a really important question because I think people's livelihoods are going to be impacted. I remember when cloud came out, and I'll use that as an example, and we realized that automation was going to start replacing what were manual capabilities. When I had a workforce that I had to deal with, we really thought about how can we retrain people? What skills do they have? We're already seeing in this new world of AI, we're seeing roles of writing documentation and copyright are changing. We're seeing tools that help you to build code more efficiently. And our people are going to be turned into just script people, where they're being told, here, go do this, but you don't really need to understand something. And so I think I always tell people, one, you need to continue to reinvent yourself in these new capabilities. You need to understand on your own, how is my job, how is my career path, at least in what I understand today, going to be impacted? And some of this we're going to know, and some of this is going to be a surprise. That's sort of fail forward. All of a sudden you find that, for example, people are bidding companies that used to take 30 FTEs. They're bidding them with 10 now and bringing their AI box to do the rest of the coding. How soon is that going to happen? So the companies that fail forward on this quickly will likely succeed in their own business models.
I've talked to a lot of different developers and asked the question of, do you worry about AI taking away your job? And they say, absolutely not. They say, it helps. It helps us very quickly understand why our code isn't working, a more efficient way that we could have created something where we added an extra space or a character that's really making a problem for us. It's really helping us do a lot better job. But we're still the ones that know what the goal is. We're still the ones that have a vision for what we're creating and how we want to direct the AI. Does that square up with your point of view, or do you have a different point of view of AI?
So if I took all my documents that represented my requirements, and I had AI create a bunch of Jira tickets, and then I told my code tool to go implement those tickets, how far could I get? And so I think the role of the developer, the role of the business analyst, the role of the product owner, I think is going to evolve. Now, how it evolves, when it evolves, will be industry specific. It'll be domain specific, but I'm not willing to make absolutes saying it's not going to change. Now, my personal experience, and I use these because I still code, is if you're a subject matter expert, those tools work better for you than if you're a novice. That's been my experience. I think that's going to change as well. And this is where we'll go back to the point of, if we talk in generalities, if we talk in a Pollyannish world, we may miss the inflections on when there's an opportunity to accelerate business, accelerate our skills in this new environment.
There's going to be a lot of folks that are coding, like yourself, that are listening to this podcast. There's a lot of leaders out there, chief technology officers are going to be listening to this podcast. On a day-to-day basis, how has the ability of AI impacted how you lead your team? Like, how do you think back now versus even 4 years, 5 years ago? How has it changed?
So I did a project for someone a number of years ago where I was part of a research project to understand how digital assistants would accelerate how people would understand about their use of AI. Now, we didn't at this time have what we have today, but it gave me an opportunity to think about it. And for myself, I use our corporate AI tools to the degree that they'll let me. And I use the corporate ones. I don't want intellectual property to not be used in an appropriate way. I follow the guidelines, and I want to make that clear. But I think it's made me more efficient, and I can move faster, and I believe I can handle more tasks. And so for right now, I see that as it's my digital assistant to make me have more superpowers in my role.
So therefore, the expectation, if I keep going down the path you're going down here, is you're going to expect more from your team too. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to be able to accomplish more. AI is going to be able to take over a lot of maybe even the early stages of the development of the code itself. Does this raise your expectations of what your team should be accomplishing?
So I'll say it a different way. So I work for a company that sells products and services. I think as the company thinks about how it wants to grow, it's taking those considerations into what they expect someone to be able to do. And so those are being put on people, and I think other companies are doing that as well. And so now I see my role back again is to make people aware of how are you using it? Can I help you? How can I be a mentor? Yeah. So I don't see my role as someone saying, you should go do this, or I'm going to put this expectation, unless you're in my rating chain. But otherwise, I'm there to help guide and mentor so that they can achieve what's being asked of them, both personally and professionally.
Paul, this is one of my favorite questions to ask. Our subject here is redefining failure. Why company success depends on CTOs and teams seeking what others miss. What have I missed? What question haven't I asked? Or what topic haven't we covered that you would want to make sure that we discuss on this podcast?
I thought about that, and as I've listened today, the question we didn't really get to is, as all these teams get all these new tools, how does the role of the CTO change? Can they get what a CTO does from all the tools that they're going to use? And so I think the answer to that is, and this goes back to what the developer believed, there's still something that requires human interaction. There's still something where you and I are having a conversation, and there's still, in the way we are as people, the fact that I have some authenticity, or you believe or not believe, you have authenticity in your podcast that people believe or not believe. And I still think we are still the sum of our experiences. And so the question that I don't think we danced on is, as we reinvent what the field CTO is today, and I see these roles changing, how are others like me going to help define that in organizations to move at these accelerated paces? And that's what I think for this podcast. And how do we get to fail in organization to grow and move forward?
One last question here. And this one is important because we've talked about so much, but if there were one thing that you wanted people to take away from the podcast today, what would that one thing be?
I think the one thing that I'd want people to take away from is really back to the talking point of fail forward. I think, and we had a conversation about being involved and engaged when we first met. I believe there's a difference. You can show up to meetings and be involved. You can go to things and just listen. You go to a sports arena, you're watching. I think that's being involved. Being engaged is you now have commitment. You're on the field. You're moving the ball forward. And when you take that sports paradigm, you need to be in the field, you, the collective you. And you have to remember, to get to game day, you had to do practice or whatever you do, the sort of the 10,000 hours. And to get to the 10,000 hours, you've been failing forward. And my takeaway is be present, be engaged, and pick those things that really are going to make a difference for you professionally, for the company you work for, the customers that you support around you.
Here's what I know. I think if we had an hour and a half or 2 hours, we could keep going. But people are going to have questions after this, Paul. Is it okay that I give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out if they had questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear from people and what they think. I say that, and then maybe we get to hear what people say, but sure, absolutely.
Fantastic. The mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives from all throughout the technology industry together in leaders. And we share from our experiences, our insights, our own perspectives. Then that's like the rising tide that lifts all boats. And I think that you were an important part of that rising tide today. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks for having me, and appreciated being on the call. And again, if you like what you heard, these are the types of things that we apply in the organization I work for, which is NetApp.